Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Hillary Krieger, the editor in charge of education newsletters at US News and World Report, and I'm delighted to be with you here today. A couple weeks ago, US News released its 2026 Best Colleges rankings. You can see the full data and rankings, along with a wealth of content about applying, paying for, and navigating college at usnews.com/education. Also, a few weeks ago, we launched a new newsletter you might be interested in if you're a parent, a prospective college student, or just want some in-depth intel about the college admissions process. Every week, you'll get a treasure trove of advice and information delivered straight to your inbox from the teams at US News and College Advisor. It's called Getting In, and I encourage you to sign up. Today, I'm pleased to welcome my colleague Eric Brooks, Director of Education Data Analysis at US News. He will be unpacking the latest edition of the rankings and sharing some important insights about the methodologies behind them. Before I turn it over to Eric, two quick notes. We are capturing video of today's session. All registrants will receive a link to the video from this session in the coming days, and the recording will also be archived on usnews.com. We'll begin our webinar with a brief presentation, but we want to allow plenty of time to address your questions. So we ask that you please type your questions into the Q&A feature in Zoom on your screen. Our team will review these in real time and ask as many as we can during the time we have. Because we might not get to every question, or you might have a question that's very specific to your school, we encourage you to also please feel free to contact us at official@usnews.com. That's OFFICIAL@usnews.com. Now I'll turn it over to Eric Brooks for more on Best Colleges 2026. Over to you, Eric.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen here. Can you see this, Hillary?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, let's begin. So I'm going to talk about the college rankings. Covering this, I'll mention some things about data collection that's of particular interest to institutional researchers or people that need to know, the deadlines and timing of when we're doing our work. Then I'll give a broader overview about our college rankings. What are the ranking factors? What are some of the changes we've made in recent years? Some of the things we're considering for the future. I'll then discuss a bit about the deliverables we provide to schools and some of our upcoming plans. So let's begin with discussing data collection and reporting. So our schedule for next year for schools is going to be roughly the same as it's been the past couple of years. In May, June of next year, we'll be, actually before that, we'll be reaching out to schools called contact verification, where we make sure that the right people at your schools, PR contacts, institutional researchers, top officials who receive the peer assessment, that we have any new names and faces in our database so they get the right information. Then after that, in May and June, we go in the field with our surveys, and we will certainly try to get them out a bit earlier next year, a couple of weeks earlier than we did this year. We always try to get it as early as possible, but there's a lot that goes into our work. In July, we will email or send schools based on their data some select communications depending upon what they reported. So if a value looks a little higher than usual, or there's something we have questions about, that's when an analyst such as myself or my team will reach out about their individual information. But then in August, for every school that submitted a survey and is ranked, we send summaries of the reported data in a data review. And this is a last chance for schools to see their data and see their draft ranking based on that data, which might enable them to uncover something that they may not have reported correctly during the first go around. Then in September, we provide schools usually a couple weeks in advance the rankings under embargo, which is just really done as a courtesy to give them time to report for institutional researchers to report up to their bosses why they changed in rank, to understand their rankings. They are preliminary rankings at that time. There are changes that can happen, especially in the first week, but we really try to iron out most of the issues with school reported data over the spring and summer. So one of the changes we did last year is we now sent schools a finance survey, which is expenditures data, very similar to what they report to iPads, but smaller. It's really the same information, but it gives us data in hand, especially given federal uncertainty about the timing of certain publications. For the latest rankings, we still generally used iPad source data for most schools, but this did give us a chance to, in some cases, use data that was going to be the revised data, the corrected data, before it could be published in the final release by iPads. One of the things that US News we're proud to be a part of is the Common Data Set. We work with Peterson's and the College Board as sort of a standardized way of definitions for information on schools, including information that's not collected by the government, things like application deadlines, financial aid, more richer information about admissions requirements, and so forth. So many of our questions rely on those. As of last year, we've only accepted form fillable PDFs for automated loading, and as far as we know, we're going to require that again this year, because our goal with schools is they can send us a PDF, we can just load it into their survey, and at the start of data collection, half their surveys pre-populated with a completed CDS. That reduces the burden for schools. It avoids any us having to do data entry, and it just is a more reliable way for us to populate surveys. So we will again begin accepting completed common data sets from April through May 2026. That said, I think the newest CDS, the 2526, could be on the Common Data Set website as early as next week, and certainly not too much later. So you can get an advanced look of what will be on the new Common Data Set. What will change? Well, based on sort of our input, the next Common Data Set will instruct schools to put their numerator and denominator used to calculate first-year retention, and it will explicitly say what our survey has said, which is student-faculty ratio must include all graduate and undergraduate students, excluding a standalone graduate program. This is not actually a change in definition. It's just it wasn't as explicit in the instructions. So this is a way to sort of codify our definition so all schools report the same way. A key difference between us and the Common Data Set is the Common Data Set instructs schools to report SAT, ACT on all students of record. That could include even ones where it wasn't used in the admission decision, such as provided after being admitted for counseling or record keeping. We don't do that because for standardization, we want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples for all schools. So we're using only SAT, ACT scores in admission decisions, which we know all schools are able to report. But because of that, we can't just pre-populate your CDS in SAT, ACT. We're going to require schools to report that directly in our survey. So a reminder about participation. We have requirement to be ranked. Schools have to be a regionally accredited institution. They have to be in an eligible Carnegie classification. We'll talk about Carnegie a bit later. And probably the fourth bullet is the biggest distinguishing factor, because about half of our ranking formula relates to graduation rates. We require a 6-year bachelor's completion rate of at least 25 full-time first-year students in one of the 4 most recent entering cohorts. And we need that data because that's everything we're doing, our grad rate performance, our social mobility, they're all relying on a comparison of 6-year graduation rates using students that are entering with no credits. For non-responders, we will use a corresponding statistic from iPads. Ranking eligibility is not at all in colleges or college rankings, not at all contingent on participation. However, there are benefits to schools for participating in ways that are not tied to our formula. So in best colleges, profiles are more discoverable using our search tools. There's more data. You'll have a richer profile. It'll be easier for students to be connected to your institution and for your institution to be connected to students. It's a requirement to submit peer scores to participate in the peer assessment survey, or at least to have those scores counted, to have access to your draft ranking and then a preliminary ranking under embargo to have that information advance. We also do footnote schools that decline to participate. Finally, if you are relying on third-party data because you don't report to us, then your data is going to be older, less representative. We know sometimes schools would rather be scored on their AAUP definition data for faculty salaries, for student-faculty ratio, because it's more representative of their offerings than when you're including non-representative staff, such as part-time staffers who might work at the university hospital, for example. So now I'm going to talk about the most recent college ranking methodology. The image there in the upper left is, I believe, what the new guidebook cover is going to look like. And I just want to point out the guidebook. I think you can pre-order that right now, especially if you're a parent or a prospective student. You just like to see all the data at once without as much clicking. It's, for a data geek like myself, I always like seeing the spreads and the information. So take a look into that. So the formula in the most recent rankings we published a couple weeks ago was pretty similar to what it was the previous year. Same ranking factor and weights, same groupings of schools, whether they're a NatU or a national university, I should say, or a national liberal arts college. The way we treat missing data, that's all the same. There were a couple of differences, though, technical differences, but they can matter more to some schools than others. Expenditures per student was based on full-time equivalent enrollment instead of sourced directly from iPads. It's a calculation using credit hours instead of full-time and part-time designation. And the reason we do that is because credit hours is a more accurate measure of need. I shouldn't say need, but of the amount of resource requirements that a student would take than a full-time, part-time designation where one institution's full-time student could be another institution's part-time student, and it's kind of a gray area sometimes, which is which. So it's just we want more precision, and that's why we did it. Likewise, required 25 instead of 20 students for graduation and retention rates, just to avoid some of these outlier values we can have when you're looking at a statistic involving a very small number of students. I always like to remind schools, we always hear from them when the rankings come out, they drop a few places, rise a few places. They have to wonder why. That 1 year of movement is not a trend. If you can see here, there's 4 different bar graphs, and whether a school rose 2 years in a row is about as likely as whether it dropped 2 years in a row. Whether it dropped then rose is about as likely as rose then dropped. And all 4 of these graphs are about the same number. In fact, coincidentally, the drop then rose and rose then drop last year was 319 each. So there isn't, in a year where we don't change anything in the ranking formula, there really isn't like momentum in the rankings where, I dropped 5 this year, it means next year I'm going to go down another 5. Most changes are just natural fluctuations of the data and data from peer schools. And that's sort of important to have that perspective when you look at just how your school changed 1 year to the next. So for the last few years, we put more weight on outcome measures. The reason we've done that, outcome measures, by the way, I wouldn't say that's the graduation rates, it's graduate or indebtedness of graduates, earnings after graduating and how that compares to what a typical high school graduate makes, whether it's more, because we think somebody who goes to college for 4 years, whatever field they want to go into, they probably at least want to make more than a typical high school graduate without college, which is about 35,000 a year. And this is what students demand. When people apply to college, you look at any survey, Gallup, Ed Research, they're interested in return on investment, the academic experience. And I mean, those are the standardized things they care about. The things that they don't, that they also care about that aren't in our rankings are very personalized about the campus culture or how close it is to home. And that's why we collect information in our surveys and are participating in the common data set so people can go beyond our rankings to find the right school for them. The formulas have changed over time. When the rankings started in the 80s and 90s, it was a smaller number of schools that were ranked. It was more of the highly selective schools or limited to those. And maybe then like focusing on things like their alumni giving rates and their, putting greater focus on admissions data made more sense just looking at that narrower group. But when you look at a broader group, you have to make sure that these people are actually graduating, the students, that the students have manageable debt. So the outcomes are important. And I mentioned that also, I guess, in this third one, access to data. We're able to measure things we couldn't measure a while ago. Income-based graduation rates, which is basically grad rates of Pell students and Stafford students and no loans. The government started collecting that a decade ago, so now we have it in our formula. The college scorecard came out about nearly a decade ago. And I think in the Obama administration, so about a decade ago, and that has data on federal loan recipients and their outcomes in terms of debt and employment. Sometimes just the nature of data changes how we do the rankings. We used to require, for example, that schools use SAT, ACT, and admissions for a school to be ranked. Obviously, standardized tests are not required as much now as they used to be, so we've made adjustments in our formula. I also want to point out we just sometimes get feedback from schools. Many of the changes we made to formulas or weights are based on discussions we have when I present it at institutional research forums, questions I get at webinars such as this, emails from schools, public opinion data. So this is a collaborative process. A note about first generation graduation rates. US News certainly is committed to in its ranking formula. We have social mobility as one of our factors that looks at grad rates of Pell Grant students. We would like to diversify that to also look at first generation students, which are students first in their households to go to college. It's just another measure of mobility. Right now, those data don't exist in a standardized way where schools can report it. IPEDS was working toward that under the previous administration, and my understanding is now they're not. So we'll keep our eyes peeled on that. But in the meantime, we are collecting those data and we're combining first generation and unknown status in our reporting so that no matter how schools report, we're doing a fair comparison. For recent years, we only use SAT, ACT in the rankings formula if reported on a majority of new entrants in either the most recent year or the previous year. And if not, then we reallocate to average graduation rate. As you can see, though, in the chart, when a school changes from not using SAT to SAT, they did slightly improve in the rankings about 2/3 of the time. Whereas if they went from being scored to not scored, they improved only 38% of the time. So we don't have any penalty or bonus explicitly, but we do have in our formula mathematics an assumption that schools that didn't report their SAT, ACT would have had lower scores than the schools that did. So by the time we calculate a normalized value, having a solid SAT, ACT score produces, I guess, a little more often than not, a higher z-score for our computations than the z-score we calculate with the substitute average graduation rates. But not always. It varies from school to school, and some are the blue, some are the yellow, some are the red. A website for updates on our rankings and information is called Behind the Numbers. It's where we announce publication dates. We always get emailed, when is the college rankings coming out? Usually a few weeks before something is published, published. We put a post here. There's also some other findings and insights. Sometimes we'll release them at the time of the rankings launches if they're a little more detailed and in depth than what we would have in the methodology. And they're written by people like myself or people on my team about what's going on with the rankings. For the last 2 years, the embargo process for schools, schools get confidential rankings through the academic insights. The rankings themselves and some information is for free and can be updated and exported. For academic insight subscribers, it all pairs together, and so that's sort of a new system, and we're looking to add some additional graduate rankings next year for attendees that are involved with graduate programs. For the academic insights, we get emails whenever there's a launch. Some people ask myself or my team for information, and this is sort of providing what we provide and don't provide. We'll help any school understand their newest rankings and data. Why am I ranked a certain way? That's us, but there is a separation between us and the people who work on the sales team for academic insights. Those are the people that you should be contacting if you're interested in being a subscriber, or also just for any information about how to navigate academic insights or the tools and applications that you should contact somebody from the academic insights team. Just as a background, the academic insights, this is what they've written it up as, but it has information not currently on our website, historical unpublished information, such as indicator level ranks instead of just the overall ranks, old methodologies, old weights and formulas, applications and dashboards that can make it easier if you're an institutional researcher reporting to your boss to just have the rankings information pipeline right into either a downloadable format for yourself, or I should say an exportable format for yourself, or into one of these tools that you could use to put a graph together like you can see in the image. And it just has some information like faculty salaries and financial resources that we wouldn't want to necessarily disclose to the whole world, but we will for institutional researchers for their benchmarking. So the next edition of Best Colleges, we're seeking feedback on entering class sizes. Currently, we've done a 4-year average of grad rates where we only do the average of the 4 cohorts that are large enough. Maybe though, instead of doing a non-weighted average, we should do a weighted average where we just take everybody who entered in 4 years and everybody who graduated in 4 years and just calculate like a single unified grad rate, which might be more representative of everyone who's came in and their outcome. The drawback of that is certainly if for any schools that have done benchmarking using the non-weighted average, it might involve some code changes or some explanation. But that's certainly something that we're asking schools about. We're also monitoring College Scorecard. That wasn't updated in time for us to update the federal loan recipient outcome measures this year. Our understanding is these will be updated in time for next year. It was kind of, even the Big Beautiful Bill Act kind of made the sort of earnings data sort of part of like its accountability measures. The Department of Ed said they're going to update it, but nonetheless, we'll be vigilant and monitor that. So the last section, we can talk about the U.S. News ranking categories. Many of you might know Carnegie. They updated their classifications in the spring of 2025. We did not update our ranking categories because it was too close to when we were doing our work. But now, we do have a plan. We're going to keep the same 10 ranking categories of national universities, liberal arts colleges, and regional universities and regional colleges. But we're going to use institutional classifications and research activity designations from Carnegie to help do the mapping. So later this month, probably toward the end of the month, we're going to notify institutions of their new category, as well as the underlying methodology, and give schools a chance to ask questions, to appeal. We don't want to just we don't want anyone to be surprised when when we go into the field next year, and we are opening to appeals from schools about why they belong in the category that they do. So this is what our mapping looks like. And it's pretty complicated. So this will all be shared with school contacts, and we're figuring out right now. We're working on like sending this to schools. I'm not going to read all of this, but the bottom line is like a national university is a school that has that has doctorates or is a R1 or R2 research institution. Liberal arts colleges, arts and sciences, and then the regionals are going to be based on the scale, whether they have master's degrees, it's going to look at the size, uh, the research activity can factor, whether it's professions focused or mixed. These are all variables that sort of determine the combination of whether a school is projected as a regional university south or regional colleges south. Um, Probably another change is we're going to start asking basically any of these schools in these special focus categories to report data to us for rank eligibility, because we think many of them have traits very similar to like regional colleges or regional universities, even if they have a focus in business or engineering. So we're just going to do sort of mapping under the same rules that we do the general categories. The exception is for faith and art schools. If it's schools entirely or almost entirely performing arts or entirely faith-based, we're not going to do rankings of those. So to recap, the core components is going to be looking at award level focus, research activity, institutional size, and its special focus. The end result, a lot of schools will be in the same category as they were in the past. Some will change categories, and there will be some appeals because that's what Carnegie did. We knew when Carnegie, with their basic classification, a school by their formula might be master's college, and the school says, no, we're really baccalaureate because we only have one master's program, but it has a lot of students, and the data is not really representative of what we offer. So that's going to come to us, and we're going to have a process that schools will know about soon enough where they can inform us of their appeals. We're also going to deviate a little from Carnegie in that we're going to have maintain the lower bar for a school to be a regional university. They sort of have reverted what they'd done in 2018, where when we ended up moving a lot of regional colleges to regional universities because they lowered the bar of what counted as masters. Now they're sort of raising it back up. We're not. So I think our category is going to be a school can be a regional university if greater than 10% of its degrees are graduate degrees and greater than 50 of its degrees are graduate degrees. Otherwise would be a regional college. So that was a wonky slide to end on, but I'm looking forward to hearing if anyone has questions about any of that or hear what some of the pre-submitted questions are.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric, for that really comprehensive presentation. We'll turn now to some of our audience questions, though I want to remind you that if we can't get to your question today, or if you have something that's very specific to your school or situation, you can always contact US News at official@usnews.com. And while we're waiting for you to submit questions, we have some pre-submitted questions from the audience. So we'll begin with those in the meantime. The first one is that it looks like the top 5 or so schools always stay the same, even when there's been so much change to funding and reputation. Why is that?
Well, that's a good question. Why do the top schools tend to stay the same? What counts as staying the same is certainly in the eye of the beholder. Like Yale University was, I think, standalone number 5 in national university this year, and last year they weren't. We've had, if you look at our public school rankings for national universities, Berkeley and UCLA, they seem to like almost switch places from number 1 to number 2 every other year. But the point of the question is right. There is a lot of stability, and the reason why is mathematics. These schools that we do at the top of the rankings, whether it's Williams and Amherst and the National Liberal Arts Colleges, or Princeton and MIT and the national universities, they're statistical outliers. They're very selective. They have very high grad rates. They're very well resourced. So they may have fluctuations in their data like any other school, but it's not likely that too many schools are going to leapfrog them year to year. Whereas when you look closer to the middle of our rankings, the schools bear more resemblance to each other statistically, and you can have uh, a greater year-to-year change in rank in spite of smaller fluctuations in their underlying data.
Yeah, and that actually goes directly to our next question, which is that aside from those top 5 or 10 schools, many of the rankings did change a lot. So, what are the major factors that accounted for those changes?
Um, so I will give some context about in terms of the amount of change in the 2026 college rankings. I think these rankings comparing 25 to 26 were among the most stable that I've worked on in the past 15 years. I did a statistical test called a Pearson's correlation, and where in a Pearson's correlation, like -1 means completely no relation to like, or inverse relation between last year and this year, and a +1 is perfect relation between last year's rank and this year's rank. And it came out a zero point 0.9, like basically 99%. So schools or ranks are 99% more similar than different year to year. The average change in rank, I believe, when I looked at this a while ago, across the rankings, was just a few places. Now, if you think of our national university rankings, we have about 430 schools. So, rounding can be attributable to a few places. But that's why I had the slide earlier where I said schools should not and parents and families should not overinterpret um, they're a school changing a few places of rank, especially if they're a mid-tier school, as some uh, major difference in the school's underlying data. There are just natural fluctuations year to year because that's how statistics work.
For sure. Um, we have another question about how US News breaks down the best universities and whether there is a breakdown for merit-based financial aid versus need-based aid.
Mhm. Well, that's a good question. So with need-based aid, we actually incorporate those data in a standalone ranking we do called Best Value Schools rankings. And that looks at schools' overall rank because academic quality matters, but it also looks at for among full-time undergraduates with need, the amount that received need-based aid and the average discount they got from the school sticker price. So adding that affordability quotient or that affordability data with the overall rank, but that is limited to students with need. We don't do a ranking that uses merit aid or non-need based aid. Although if such aid is allotted toward need, which it can be, sometimes non-need based aid helps students who also have need, those data count. Schools can report that data to us in their need-based aid calculations. What we do have with non-need based aid on our website, we update a list every year of schools that awarded the most merit aid. It's not a ranking, but it is a list where schools that provide a lot of merit aid or provide merit aid to a high percent of students, appear at the top of our list.
You spoke about some of the changes and things that have been removed over time. One viewer is particularly interested in the issue of class size and why that was removed for the rankings. There's a difference, of course, between a class with 1,600 students, many of whom might be on Zoom, and a class with 15 students. So why that change?
Yeah. Well, the questioner is right. There is a difference between 1,600 and a smaller number. And we do sort of capture still class, I guess, engagement on some of our other statistics, like student faculty ratio. We increased the weight of that ranking factor after class size was taken out of the formula. We also have ranking factors like expenditures per student and faculty salaries, and they sort of are an indicator of resources which can correlate with the amount of attention that students receive. Now, we don't have class size as a statistic anymore. Simply put, it isn't data that was universally reported by schools. It's not something the government requires. We still collect it. It's still part of the common data set. Um, but there wasn't a need for it in our overall rankings when we had other statistics such as student faculty ratio and financial resources that were universally available and had greater standardization. Um, yeah.
Someone writes that they find it difficult to identify the competitive advantage or value proposition that each school uses to differentiate itself from any other one other than location and price. A path to finding connection between students and their schools seems to be absent from the considerations, for instance. Can you explain the thinking behind the differentiation you use?
Well, as I said, um, the way we differentiate schools as a ranker is to look at things that matter broadly to prospective students, like return on investment, academic quality, um, academic rigor, those types of things. There are things that matter very differently from one student to the next, and that's why we collect information that aren't used in our rankings on financial aid availability, on everything from like whether we do rankings of study abroad programs, not which is the best study abroad program, but we ask schools to nominate other institutions that are strong study abroad. We do a ranking of most innovative schools. We do outside of our college rankings, we do rankings of online degree programs that are for distance learners. So we cover a bunch of different angles, and we have a lot of different information on our website that can be uh, searchable by prospective students and their families to distinguish on characteristics other than those used in the rankings. We also take data from the government, including College Scorecard, which has earnings data on different majors. So you can know from a certain school if someone goes to major in engineering, what maybe the typical salary of a federal loan recipient who had a degree in engineering was a few years after graduating that school.
Someone else asks if you could talk a bit about how the data for small liberal arts colleges compares to bigger universities. Does the smaller student body create more variability in rankings from year to year, for instance?
The answer to the question is yes. Smaller statistics do create more variability from year to year. Um, when you're dealing with smaller cohorts and you're looking at data that are percentages like graduation rates or retention rates or the percent of student body that's awarded Pell Grants or SAT scores, any statistic, when you're dealing with small numbers, those averages or percentages move a bit more when you're dealing with smaller cohorts.
We have another question about colleges that send a very high percentage of students to graduate school and whether you consider graduate school attendance when rating student outcomes for a given college.
Mhm. That's a great question, and certainly, I mean, it would be something that I wish we could. Like, I don't think that data is broadly available. We had in the past tried collecting information in our surveys about the percent of graduates um, at colleges who like went to medical school or went to law school, and I think just graduate school in general. And the bottom line is that requires a college to track what their student did after graduating, and that data is not always available to the schools. So we're not able to incorporate that into our outcome measures. I do think there's some information on our website about um, how a certain school, which schools like might feed into certain graduate programs. I'm not sure about the details of that, but I know that is a goal of our website to help, as far as helping people visiting it find the right program for their uh, or right college for their longer term interests.
We have a couple of questions about international students.
Mhm.
One is whether US News has a list of the universities with the highest international student enrollment, and whether that's something captured in the broader data. And then also whether admissions for international students, are expected to be tougher this year.
Yeah. Those are great questions, and it's certainly something that's on a lot of people's minds are international students. The first question is we do publish a sorted list of schools that had the highest percent of international students. We don't, it's not a ranking, but it is a list and it's uh, on our website. As far as enrollment, uh, the data hasn't come in yet. The current administration is less than a year old. But obviously well, they had a first term and there was a drop in international student enrollment, and they are taking steps and they have taken steps and are seeking to push a rule for further steps that would make it limits on visas, or making it harder for an international stay enrolled, or pressure school, or well, not pressure, but like limit the amount of international enrollment a school can have of its total student body. So we'll have to wait and see what the effects are. But I know I don't work at a school, but I hear firsthand, secondhand from people who do work at schools and work in enrollment management. And certainly, the current administration and their work, their actions are taking toward international students, toward DEI, and so forth, raises concerns about how they can, uh, meet their enrollment goals when it may be more challenging to recruit or admit students outside the high propensity, uh, the individuals who are most likely to apply to college. They got to find ways to get more applicants, to get more enrollment, because there's demographic challenges and all other sorts of things that are written about that schools got to do to meet enrollment.
And also connected to the current political environment to some degree. There's been a lot of turmoil on campuses in recent years, especially elite universities. Is that reflected in the rankings? And how do you assess the campus environment, especially in this particular political era?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question that we've been asked a lot of times. The U.S. News College rankings work in data. So we look at things like SAT scores and faculty salaries. So we're not going to do any direct measure of campus culture. I don't know how one would do that. That said, you know, if the campus culture can affect statistics in the medium to long term, if any institution is less attractive to future applicants, or less attractive to distinguished faculty, or if students don't want to stay enrolled at a school because they have a lower opinion of it compared to a school they could transfer to, then that will eventually show up in the data.
What's the process for the rankings of honors colleges and programs?
So the U.S. News College rankings do not have a distinct ranking of honors colleges and programs. It's something we've also dabbled in a little bit. We've dabbled in a lot of things that people have interest in. We were talking earlier about graduate school, and now we're talking about honors colleges. We collected in our survey whether a school has an honors college and whether a school has an honors program, because sometimes there's not a standalone college, but there still is a program. Um, but we have not collected data specific to those honor colleges and programs in any great depth, let alone to do a ranking. But uh, school, it is something that information is published on school profiles, whether they offer these programs or honor schools.
For students and family trying to find the right fit for them, do you have any insights about how they can use the US News rankings to do that best? And does US News have any tools to help with that?
Hmm. Yes, I'm not the person who works in them. I work on the rankings, and so I'm not going to give the best explanation of what those tools are, but I've been saying really all morning, afternoon, I guess it's both, depends where you're watching. Um, that we do have search tools that where prospective student they put in interest in their costs or geography, or what other information that are personalized. You want to do women's flag football, you can make that in your search filter, and only that schools come up that have women's flag football as an option. So you can be as specific or non-specific as you want. And those things are there to complement the rankings. I think also students can set up accounts with US News that are personalized, and they get like more personalized recommendations based on quizzes they take and other information they provide. But as I mentioned earlier, with Academic Insights, kind of there's a barrier between them and us. We talk together, but it's run by those people for obvious reasons. It's the same thing with student accounts on our website or other facets. We want to really have the people who work on the rankings sort of focusing on that aspect of best colleges.
What is the trajectory of undergraduate enrollment in the United States?
It seems to keep changing year to year, doesn't it? I mean, there was terms of enrollment. I know that COVID, it went. People are taking things remotely, and it made it harder to sort of know what the statistics were. And then they were having a big drop in this type of student, and then a big rise in that type of student. So I don't have a big takeaway on where it is. I know there's demographic challenges that they're having. I know, particularly with men are less likely to want to enroll in four-year degree programs. And that's even before the whole recruiting and admissions and international students and those types of issues I was discussing earlier. And the other thing that we don't know is, the economy. It's right now uh, unemployment might be going up. The economy might be getting a bit weaker. Sometimes education's countercyclical, but we'll have to. I don't know what the economy is going to do in the future, let alone I can't predict what enrollment's going to do in the future. But I'll certainly be watching it just like you are.
Does US News rank undergraduate universities for business and finance?
The answer to that question is yes. US News does do a undergraduate ranking of business programs, or ranking of undergraduate business programs. They're limited to schools with programs that are accredited by AACSB, which is the sort of the gold standard of accreditation. So that's in just an overall ranking for undergraduate business. But we also ask schools in our peer assessment survey, that's the foundation of that ranking, to nominate other institutions, I think up to 15, that have strength in different areas like finance and accounting, uh, project management, real estate, and so forth. And one of them is finance. Uh, and based on the number of nominations each school receives, we rank schools in descending order of their nominations. So if the most nominations was 55, then the school with 55 nominations is ranked number one in finance. 53 nominations, ranked number two in finance.
Great. We have just a couple more questions. So we have 9 minutes left. If anyone has the last question that they want asked, please send it in now so it can make our deadline. Let's see, what do we have left? If a school decides not to continue to fill out surveys, maybe when a program becomes small and is not really beneficial to complete the survey, what happens? Is data for that school pulled from other sources or omitted?
That's one of the most common questions we get. And in the college rankings, for missing data in our rankings, we usually can pull a substitute value from the Department of Education, IPEDS, because we're using definitions that match or are very similar to the government's data. Now, I say substitute because those data are going to be a year older than what we're able to have schools report to us. By the time schools report to us, they've reported certain information to the government. The government has not yet curated and released publicly. So we can't access them. The public can't access them. That's one reason we still collect data to have more recent information on admissions and so forth. Now, if a school doesn't participate, though, some of the information that's not used in the rankings, financial aid application deadlines, course and program offerings, that kind of information will not be populated on our website. And by extension, the school may be less visible in our search tools for when students and families are trying to find a school based on certain criteria.
Is it generally true that the acceptance rate at many of the top ranked schools has dropped over the past 2 decades? If so, what contributes to that trend?
Yes, as the acceptance rate dropped. I assume what they mean is drop, meaning the number is lower, meaning they're becoming more selective. And the answer is I haven't looked at the trend super recently, but certainly compared to a generation ago, the answer is yes. And a lot of that has to do with the denominator in acceptance rate. It's the number of applications and then the number of those applications offered admittance. And while many of the selective schools have similar head counts than they did a generation ago, more students apply because it's easier than it was in the past. There's the common application. I mean, just technology. Maybe there's other reasons too. But that was a trend that happened over the long term. I don't think in recent years they've gone increasingly lower, but they are extremely low. And I think anybody, I'm old enough now where I'm starting to have friends whose kids are old enough to apply to colleges, and it's definitely a bit of a crapshoot sometimes. Which applicant A got into this school but not that school, and applicant B got into that school but not this school. These are very highly selective institutions, and they have their methods for deciding who and who isn't admitted.
When it comes to the reputation survey, if an institution is an outlier in how it's rated by its peers, how is that handled? Are outliers like this removed from the pool, or what's the process?
This was about peer assessment?
In the reputational survey.
Okay. Yes, okay. Yeah, so the reputational survey you're mentioning is we ask schools to rate other schools in their category, like national universities or national liberal arts colleges, on a scale of 1 to 5, marginal to outstanding, on their academic quality, limiting to only rate schools with which they are familiar. And we pick like schools, so schools are more likely to be familiar with the type of school that they're rating. We do get rid of outliers by we trim the 2 highest and 2 lowest scores submitted received by each school, and that's a statistical that's just like a practical statistical thing that's done sometimes with qualitative ratings.
And do you consider PhD production as a factor in a school's best colleges ranking?
We do not use PhD production as a ranking factor in best colleges. We do in some of our graduate school rankings, which are, of course, related more closely to PhDs. The only thing that we use that's sort of adjacent to that is we have a few low-weighted metrics for national universities, which are universities that award doctorates, and we look at sort of their imprint of their research, like how often their publications are cited and that kind of thing.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Eric, for your time and insights and incredible detail and what you've shared with us over the course of this hour. Thank you to our audience for joining us and for the excellent questions that you asked. Again, if we did not have a chance to address your particular question, or you have something specific about your own school's data or your specific situation you want to follow up with, please contact the team at official@usnews.com. You can find out more on our rankings and how to navigate all aspects of the college experience at usnews.com/education, and check out there the wealth of other products and materials we have to help navigate the college experience. And if you want to sign up for our Getting In newsletter, please go to the US News homepage and find the submission button there. Thank you very much, and see you next.